got me coffee. You're the best.
So what Texas team are you cheering for in the big dance?
Tech. Because nobody cheers for Tech.
I thought I was kind of about half surprised how good they were. I thought they won that last game pretty handily.
They're good. Who are you rooting for?
Who you pick?
Well, right now I've picked Auburn. Gotta stay friendly with the staff. You know?
Gotta make the staff happy.
When they screwed over Boise State, I said, I don't care who wins. You know?
Do you have Boise State in your district?
Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't realize that. I love Boise. Boise is one of my favorite overnights as a pilot.
Yeah, it is
Southwest.
really nice.
I love it.
Nice to meet you.
I love it.
Very well. How's all in West Virginia?
I'm in Southwest Virginia, but you're right.
I'm thinking Virginia. Okay.
I circle around the Mine Land West Virginia, so you're not far off. It's all the same people.
What's the biggest enterprise in your area?
Overstimulated.
What you got going there?
I had an ophthalmologist appointment today.
Oh, so they put the drops in?
Yeah, so I'm dilated.
Yeah, your left eye's.
Went out into the car, and
That's what it is.
someone else was driving.
He got. That's what it is.
Yeah.
You probably have
It was artificially dilated by drops. I don't know what kind of drops they were.
You may not recall it
Yeah, aviators.
years ago.
You gotta wear them for these.
Joe Biden ruined those.
He's gone. Nobody remembers him anymore. Now that's cool. That is what he has to do this hearing again.
You could tell he was a pilot, can't you? You could tell he was a pilot.
You have to wear those throughout this hearing. You've got to.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Watch. Somebody in Idaho will put a Biden picture with his aviators next to mine.
You wore it better.
You have to wear that.
Let me see if I can find my opening statement. Okay, and I apologize that I had a ophthalmology appointment this morning, and they dilated and everything else in my eyes, and so it'll take a while for those to go down. So it's no disrespect that I have my sunglasses on or his sunglasses on.
I just thought you were being cool.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. I tried to.
He is every day.
Now the world can see it, how cool you are, just like we see it.
That's right.
That was a little.
I'm going to
suck
quit
uppy. I'm
hiding
sorry
myself.
that was-
I'm going to quit hiding myself under a basket, you know. Good morning, and thank you all to my colleagues for joining us to provide their testimonies on this fiscal year's 2026 Interior and Environment Bill. I look forward to hearing more about the projects and programs in the bill that are important to each of your districts and to your communities across the country. Your input will be critical as we work to find as we work to fund agencies under this subcommittee's jurisdiction, including the Department of Interior, the Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Forest Service, and Indian Health Service, and several others. We will work to accommodate these priorities as best we can as the fiscal year 2026 appropriations process moves forward. Thank you again to each of you, my colleagues, for being here today and have taken time out of your busy schedule to speak with us. We thank you for you bringing these issues to our attention. At this time, I'd like to yield to Ranking Member Pingree for an opening statement.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Looking extremely cool this morning. I appreciate your holding this hearing. I think it's a great opportunity for our members to let us know their priorities as we work through some of the challenging budget issues before us. I'm really pleased to see both of you and one who will join us soon, and look forward to hearing your testimony. Thank you so much.
Ms. Kepter, you're up first. Welcome.
How did that happen?
Back to this committee. Seniority counts for something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be with you and Ranking Member Pingree, affording us this opportunity to testify before this really vital committee, the Interior Subcommittee, today. And I've served on this subcommittee in the past with both of you and have truly enjoyed working together to address the vital topics within this jurisdiction. And I've served long enough to see progress in my region, and that is very heartening. Freshwater is life. I come before you today as co-chair of the House Great Lakes Task Force, a bipartisan group to support reasonable funding for a very important, successful, and popular program across our Great Lakes region entitled the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, GLRI, for the largest body of freshwater on Earth. GLRI is life-giving across the vast area that I represent and call home. Just cleaning up the Black River in Lorain, Ohio, took efforts beginning in the 1980s, early in my congressional career, that were accelerated then by the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and finally completed last year, in the year of 2024. This success has yielded one of the best walleye fishing areas at the mouth of the Black River that flows into Lake Erie. And it is just so exciting to see life sprout up again. That says a lot. As Lake Erie is the largest fishery in the entire Great Lakes, and already this spring, anglers with fishing poles decked out in waders up to their shoulders are waist-deep in cold water all across the lakes, but especially the Maumee River that slices through our congressional district, the largest river that flows into the Great Lakes. And it is a river that needs our continued attention as it drains the largest watershed and also manure shed in the entire Great Lakes. We have work to do. GLRI's work to remediate the infractions of prior generations is essential. As House co-chair of the bipartisan Great Lakes Task Force and a senior member of our Appropriations Committee, funding the GLRI is among my highest priorities. When I was a child, our immigrant grandmother, whose name was Teofila, which translates into Daughter of God, a hardworking farm girl from Central Europe, when the Bolsheviks were taking control of the open pasture land of the peasants, came to America, and she would take me for walks later along the Maumee River. She scooped up a handful of water. I can still remember dirty water. I was very young, showing it to me and saying, someday America will pay a great price for this disrespect of Mother Earth. How spot on she was, and she had very little education. The GLRI Act of 2025 is bipartisan legislation that will reauthorize the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative for another 5 years through fiscal year 2031. The bill increases funding that benefits our communities and the more than 40 million people that draw their fresh water from our lakes. It is vital to maintaining and sustaining our communities for generations to come as populations grow and our nation approaches 350 million, headed to 400 million. We cannot behave as though it is 1940 or even 1900. Vice President Vance hails from my home state of Ohio. He served as Senate co-chair of the Great Lakes Task Force there, and he was a sponsor of the GLRI Act. It is my sincere hope that his experience will help the new administration understand the importance of this funding. We hail from America's freshwater kingdom, comprising 20% of the fresh water on Earth. I believe the President himself appreciates the incalculable value of fresh water for our nation and continent. GLRI seeks to restore the Great Lakes ecosystem. Doing so enhances the economic health of our region, but also improves public health, as well as that of nature's critters like bald eagles and trumpet swans that choose our region as home. When I was first elected, there was just one pair of nesting bald eagles left on Lake Erie because of DDT. Today, after decades of effort, there are now nearly 100 pairs, and they even do tourism tours showing people where the nests are. Across our region, GLRI funds remove very, very toxic legacy pollution, including the residue from products like beryllium, to achieve freshwater quality and habitat restoration. It is critical in reducing the spread of harmful invasive species as well, such as preventing the destructive Asian carp that is moving up the Mississippi River as we meet today and seriously threatens our Great Lakes $7 billion fishery and our $16 billion boating industry. The GLRI also funds so much of the work to mitigate the harmful algal blooms occurring in our Great Lakes. In 2014, those horrid blooms got into the freshwater system of my hometown of Toledo. And the water was shut off. The city shut off the water for 3 days to customers in Ohio and Michigan. The crisis was surreal, but it remains in my mind as if it was yesterday, and it reminded us of Mother Nature's power over us. With the help of our bipartisan members of the Great Lakes Task Force, we've been able to protect and even slowly make improvements to our freshwater systems and all of the piping and everything that goes into it. But we are far from freshwater security. And I will tell you, when I look at the money, and this is no prejudice against west of the Mississippi River, I support all of that. But the legacy environmental debt plaguing all of our Great Lakes cities, whether it's Milwaukee, Wisconsin, whether it's Detroit, Toledo, Cleveland, you go along the Great Lakes. Because of EPA mandates, we've provided a lot of indebtedness to our cities, but they don't get the amount of federal support that the West does. And we actually have more people that draw water from our lakes than the Bureau of Reclamation provides for those that live west of the Mississippi. I want to help them too, but the environmental debt is it plagues many of these manufacturing cities that have much of their industrial capacity outsourced to other nations. And we have to pay greater attention to the environment. So please let me recall that GLRI was designed to be a supplemental program. Without solid base funding at the Environmental Protection Agency, the GLRI cannot be effective. My hope is that the bipartisan House Appropriations Committee will work with the Trump administration to appropriately fund programs like GLRI. It surely creates jobs, recreational opportunities, economic development, and most importantly, preserves clean drinking water for the millions who depend on this precious, precious resource. Over 80% of Midwesterners support the GLRI, and it regularly passes the House and the Senate in overwhelmingly bipartisan fashion, one of the rare programs that do. Everyone can agree GLRI is just good common sense to protect our most important natural asset, fresh water, which is the basis of life itself. Thank you, Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Pingree, for allowing me to present this before you today, and I yield back.
Thank you. Do I understand you need to leave ASAP? For some, yeah. If you don't have to, then we'll
Go
hear
right ahead. Go right
Representative Griffin.
Chairman, if you all want to ask questions and let Ms. Captor go, it's fine with me.
No, go ahead,
Yes,
Representative
please go
Griffin. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate you, Mr. Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Pingree, for holding today's hearing, and I appreciate the committee's willingness to provide me with an opportunity to draw attention once again to the Abandoned Mine Land Economic Revitalization Program, or the AMLER program. And I have to go through that because, as you all know, sometimes it often gets confused with the historical Abandoned Mine Land program, which is a completely different animal. This pilot program began several years ago at the behest, and in all fairness, at the genius of my neighbor on the Kentucky side of the line, Hal Rogers. It was a great program, and then we piggybacked on his brilliance. Before it was created, of course, you had the old program, but under this program, the big difference is not only do you clean up sites, but you can transition the site for an economic development reason. In a district that is 409th out of 435 in take-home pay, it's a big deal. This has done more for the part of Appalachia that I represent in the coal fields of Southwest Virginia than any other program has done. Project Intersection in Norton, which serves a number of counties down there, has created 345 jobs. They took down a high wall that would have taken a lot longer under the old program to get taken down. It had been sitting there for years. Took down the high wall, created an industrial development park, got 2 people already in it, got plenty of extra land. We have a large site of several hundred acres where they completely cleaned up an old coal fines pit, where they put the small little pieces of coal they couldn't use at the time, cleaned that up, took down the old coal processing plant, and now there's several hundred acres. That one hadn't hit yet, as you know, with economic development and industrial sites. That one hadn't hit yet, but it's prime. It has rail. It has electricity coming in from 2 different directions. It's got everything already there because it was an industrial site to begin with, and it wouldn't have happened if it had not been. Even the Office of Surface Mining came in and said it would have cost us a lot more money because it was a public-private deal where we put in the public money, and a private developer took all the stuff off, was able to sell the coal that couldn't be used in the past, but now there's technology to use it. It's been a win-win. There's also all kinds of tourism that we've been able to do. We've increased, parking at the Devil's Bathtub. We've increased the ability to use some trails in Dickinson County, which is if my district is economically challenged, Dickinson County is one of the most economically challenging counties out of the 28 jurisdictions I represent. And they created horseback riding trails, and you say, well, what does that have to do with coal mining? Along the path they wanted to use were all kinds of mine portals, entrances to abandoned coal mines from the early part of the 20th century. Able to close those off, make those safe, that then made it available so that people could get in there and actually ride horseback. So it's been extremely important, and there's a lot more in my written statements, but that's what I wanted to get across. Is this has really been it doesn't cost that much money in the big scheme of things, but it's been big. I will also raise this issue that came up. We didn't start this way, but it's been a problem. Federal government has, and y'all took care of it in last year's language, and I don't know whether it survived the CR or not, but one of the concerns is that the federal government suddenly decided that if the people who got the money didn't succeed for whatever reason, then the federal government would take title back to the land. I don't have a problem with a term of years. I don't. And I can give you a whole legal dissertation on my theories on this. I would suggest 7. I don't have any problem with the federal government making sure that, that it's not some scam. I don't have a problem with that. But they wanted to make it in perpetuity. You can't get anybody to develop, and one of my counties has specifically said, we're not touching it. If the federal government is going to come back in, if this project doesn't work the way we planned and they can come back in perpetuity, we're not going to do it. So I would suggest 7. I think there's good legal basis in the altered common law adverse possession law to go as high as 15. That's been amended for about 200 years in Virginia to a 15-year period. And even that's acceptable. My counties have told me that they prefer the 7, but they could live with the 15 because then, they too don't want to scam, but they don't want to have something that sits there and all of a sudden it becomes a permanent problem because the federal government has taken title to it and doesn't know what to do with it. Local people are more likely to figure out what to do with it. So I've raised that issue for you, and I'm happy to assist your team any way I can on that issue. But those are the issues. But this is just a fabulous program that, like I said, I'm glad I brought it to Virginia, but I wish that I could claim that I had the genius to figure it out in the first place, but that belongs to Hal. And I yield back.
Thank you, and I understand the third witness is not going to be attending today. So besides having the federal government take it over in perpetuity, they can actually make it so that they will get it in the long run, if that's their wish. They can make it so hard to develop that they know it's just not going to happen.
And while that's technically accurate, we've not seen signs that that's what they want to do.
No.
It's just that somebody decided that they needed to have the ability to come back in and have basically a reversionary clause on the property in perpetuity. And because you don't have adverse possession against the federal government, there's no way for the county to ever use that land going forward. No. And it just sits there. And the whole purpose of this program, of course, is to clean up the mess.
Yep.
But then to convert it so that it can be used for something that produces jobs or tax base for the local jurisdiction and helps folks out in one of the most economically stressed regions of the country.
Yeah. I was interested that you mentioned the high walls that you took down.
Yeah.
It's an issue in Idaho right now on the Fort Hall Indian Reservation where they had phosphate mining out there. Mm-hmm. And now they've left in these pits with high walls, and the tribes want them taken down. They should be. I look at them and say, give me a few sticks of dynamite, and I'll take that high wall down for you. But I guess there's a better way to do it that requires more money and stuff. But we're working with them on who has the responsibility, the mining company, what's the EPA and the Bureau of Land Management's issues on this and stuff. So it's a challenge.
It is a challenge. And in ours, it was a high wall with a company that had gone belly up, so there was no corporate entity to look to, and it literally was a few feet off of the main highway.
Oh, is that right?
Oh yeah, we had this. I mean, you would drive into the town of Norton, and there was this cliff. They had to have fencing. The local government had to pay for fencing to keep people from going up there and
Yeah.
accidentally falling off into the road. I mean, it was an eyesore and a dangerous element, and it prevented development of this area up on top that was relatively flat. Smooth that out. Now we have businesses going in. It's a huge success story for our region.
Marcy, it's always good to hear from you.
Thank you.
We have been able to take care of the Great Lakes Initiative pretty well for last year and through the CR and that kind of stuff, and we'll continue to do that. I kind of have a little commitment with Joyce on that, so. And but that's important to us too. You mentioned the Eagles.
Yes.
And that they're back now.
Yes, they're beautiful.
This is my Trivial Pursuit question for you or
Oh.
anyone. I read a book called Eagle's Plume, which is kind of the history of eagles and stuff. Do you know what state has more bald eagles than any other than any other state?
Oh, boy, that's a good question. I would guess it's in the West.
That's what I would have thought, being from Idaho.
I'm
I would-
Virginia's making a run at it, but I don't know if we're there yet.
Texas. Come on.
See?
Everything's about Texas.
But everybody thinks Alaska, because you see pictures of bald eagles in Alaska. You see, and I thought, well, then it must be Idaho or Montana or whatever, you know, Florida.
Ew, poor things, it must be so hot down there.
They're fishermen. That's kind of what I thought. But eagles are fishermen, and think of all the streams and ponds and everything else they got to fish at down there. I just found that interesting. So that's another feather, I guess, in Florida's cap, right? The rest of us
That's
will complain about it.
interesting. I wouldn't have guessed
Some
that.
of my staff members will try to convince me that SEC football is actual good football, and I'm just, you know.
May I share a story? One of my compelling memories of Secretary of Interior Haaland during her service, she came out to the Great Lakes, and I happened to be there, and it was just about this time of year, it's spring, when the ice was breaking up on the lake and everything. And we went way deep into some of the wetlands that open onto Lake Erie. And as she was walking, she knelt down, and she took a piece of land and she kissed it. Because knowing the history, you can understand the names Erie, Cuyahoga, these various names that Ottawa, that are in our region, names as counties and so forth. And then I looked up, and where the ice was just melting, and I looked out on the lake, and I saw something I had never seen. I thought it was ballerinas, and they were trumpeter swans. I had never seen trumpeter swans in the spring. Oh, my goodness, they were so beautiful. And so the beauty, the stark beauty of this country and what it took to settle
Oh, yeah.
that region, which was swamp, what a credit to our forebears. So thank you for continuing in that tradition on this subcommittee.
You bet. Ms. Pingree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for testifying. I have the good fortune of living on a tidal inlet, and so I have eagles outside my home all the time, and it's been really amazing to see the comeback of the eagles and to see them up close. But the best viewing of an eagle I ever had was in the chairman's office when you brought one in there, and it was kind of shocking and majestic at the same time to be that close, because they're scary and they're really big.
Paws are really
Yeah, and that's just changed my whole view. When they fly over, I'm like, oh, I know what they look like close up. It's really quite amazing. Marcy, no one champions the Great Lakes, or Representative Capter, as well as you do, and thank you for doing that. It's really critically important, and I hope we can continue to be very, very supportive. Being from New England, I support your bias that there's too much money that goes to the West and not enough to help, particularly with the post-industrialization areas and the burden that has been there over time, which is true of everything kind of east of the Mississippi. So to the extent that I can be helpful, I'm always happy to do that, and with reauthorization here. But I also appreciate your remarking on the importance of having consistent funding from the EPA for so many of the things that you do. And as we see the cuts that have already been made, the cuts that are proposed, I think it's just very worrisome about how we'll maintain that fundamental base of doing the environmental cleanup work that we have to do and supporting that agency. But thank you for being here to make all these extremely important points in the eloquent way that you always do. So appreciate your long service. And Representative Griffith, Morgan, nice to see you. And I appreciate also, I have a vague memory of when Chairman Rogers was working on this program, but it really is, as you say, sort of a good combination of doing the appropriate cleanup, but then allowing communities to see the economic development, which I think helps people honestly have a better feeling about what the government does, and recognizing that our communities need these economic opportunities. We're the ones who've lived with the other side of what went on over the years, and if you've lost that industry, you need it in particular. So I hope we can be helpful to you to continue with that. And I would also just say, I feel like in this era of DOGE and cuts and a lot of activity that goes on, sometimes without this committee even, having a sense of what they're cutting before they cut it and how do we get it back, it's really important for every program to have a champion. It just really is. And obviously that means a lot to your state, and there's some real value there. And the way we can keep track of all that is changing before our very eyes and what will be changed in this budget. So I hope you'll just continue to keep us informed about it, and we'll certainly try to keep our eye on it. But I think it's really beneficial that you're there to do it. And what is a high wall?
It's where they come in and they mine through here, but they've cut away part of the cliff, and you leave the remaining cliff where the mine used to be on the other side, so that you have just this literally a rock wall,
Like a cut
straight
in
up.
the.
Yep, it's a straight up rock wall.
And how do you?
I mean, they're not all straight up. Some of them are slanted a little bit, but they're too high to be safe.
So how do you remediate it?
You take it down. I mean,
Oh, you level the peak there.
Yeah,
Okay.
you level it out, but it takes a lot of earth moving and a lot of. It's not cheap.
Great. Well, thank you. Really appreciate your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Our tribes in Idaho, in the Fort Hall Reservation, where these high walls are, and there's several, because they had several pits out there, are afraid that in the winter, there's a lot of snow machining that goes on out there, and somebody's going to fly off one of those high walls, and it'll be all over then.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a dangerous problem. Mr. Elsey.
Thank you, Chairman Maverick. Representative Capter, I'm curious what, can you tell me about the algal blooms, and what are they, what are the detrimental effects of it, and how does this program help with the problem?
That's a really important question. And here's what one of our farmers said to me from Williams County. I was out there for a meeting, and he said, "Congresswoman, let me ask you a question." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Where did algal blooms come from? Why are they there?" I said, "Well, they're there because of dissolved reactive phosphorus." And he said, "So how are we going to solve the problem?" I said, "We can't seem to solve it very easily. I think we need monitors in the lake that are hooked up to a main pole so we can get above the frequency of 7 or 8, whatever the number is, to be able to detect where the dissolved reactive phosphorus is coming from over this vast region, because we've not been able to really pinpoint it to where we can remediate as the rains flow across the land and it washes into the lake and so forth." So he goes, "So let me ask you a question. 1990, we didn't have algal blooms." I said, "Well, I'm not remembering exactly, but I said, I guess you're right." And he said, "But then what happened in 1995? I said, "Did it warm up?" "Nope, didn't do that." He goes, "Glyphosate." And I said, "Oh," which is an ingredient in Roundup Ready. And our region is a huge soy and corn bowl all across this area because it's so arable. And he said, "And then it kept getting worse, didn't it?" And I said, "Oh my gosh." And I believe him to be correct. But we even had NASA try to help us fly over. They put a big plane up in the air, and using their detection devices to try to probe into the water to see where this was coming from above the lakes. Even NASA couldn't do it because their frequency was not above 7 in the equipment that they put up in the air. So we are still struggling to figure out where this is all coming from, because it's the main ingredient in the growth of toxic algal blooms. And we have to figure out how to remediate. And that means dealing with fertilizers on the field and or on the yard, reconstituting those. I used to work for an agricultural firm back in Ohio, and that's not as easy as it sounds. But that's where we have to focus. And it's like nobody can come up with the answer. So what happens is, like our water system that was shut off, the toxic algal blooms got in. They got in, and now we've had to put all this money in trying to figure out how to filter it out. But that's not the only problem we have. We have problems with quagga mussels and zebra mussels and all these things that came in through international shipping. I believe Chair Simpson understands what I'm talking about. And now those just encrust all of our water pipes. It's like, oh, now we got this problem. And so both of those issues cause real problems in the freshwater delivery systems, and they are antiquated. Trying to reconstitute the fertilizers in some way, we can't control the rainfall, and there's more of that, so there's more washing but through agriculture bills, and we're working on this in the new agriculture bills, we can try to do more on-farm capture and filter across the region, but that won't be enough because of what is happening with the chemicals in the fertilizers.
So is it seasonal or perennial? Based on runoff.
It's based on runoff and also the amount of rainfall. I was out at one hog farm, and we've got to deal with the manure. I mean, that's another part of this where we're not using the manure for power and for fertilizer. We're letting it drain off, and we're not using it. We're not dealing with the watershed in a modern way. We're farming like it's pick your number, 40, 1930, whatever it is. And all across our country, we have to deal with this because of increasing population. So for us, where we've got this freshwater threat, we really need to have the best scientists that there are at USDA and elsewhere to help us reconstitute fertilizers. And we have to have the hardware to provide clean water to people and modernize those systems.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Representative Griffith, how do you seal up these mines? Two questions. How do you seal up the mines? And the 7 versus 15, both those numbers seem very arbitrary. So what is the scientific delineation for why it's 7 versus 15?
Remind me to get to the first question. I'm going to answer the last question first. The 7 is totally arbitrary. I picked it out because I kind of like it. Okay. The 15, so at common law, you could get adverse possession, which means if nobody's using the land in a manner which is conducive, and it's more complicated than that, but basically there was a common law principle that if nobody's using the land and somebody steps into the land and starts using it, after 20 years in the common law, coming over from England, the land then became the property of whoever was using it for a valid purpose. You had to have color of title, and there's all kinds of other legal issues. But that's your big one, is somebody's actually using it for a bona fide purpose, and nobody has come in and said, wait a minute, that's my land. That was changed for purposes of actual ownership in Virginia, and again, I'd have to go do the research, but about 200 years ago, I might be off by 50 years, plus or minus, to 15 years, because they felt like 15 years was sufficient time if somebody said, wait a minute, that's my land you're farming on, or my land that you're doing something on, you could come in. That's where I got the 15 from. It's based on the updated Virginia version of the common law at 15 years. I know that may not apply to most states, but all of your states that are currently in the AMLER program are states that originally derived their laws from the common law. And so that's why I picked that. So the 15 is less arbitrary. The 7 means that the local governments have a better ability to keep track of it, and they obviously would prefer the shorter period. But I put the 15 in my statement because I can actually justify that one from a legal standpoint.
So is 5 better? Is 3 better?
Well, I would submit, and this is just my gut, that 3 or 5 might be too little when you're dealing with the title to real estate and the ability to improve real estate, that you want to, if somebody's trying to pull a scam on the local government and the federal government, 3 to 5 might not tell it. I think 7 probably does tell it. That's a Morgan gut issue as opposed to having any scientific or historical basis. The 15 is a historical basis, but I think once you get above 7, most of the folks who are don't play those games that long.
Okay.
And that's just where I came up with that. Now, the first question I've forgotten. I knew I was
Sealing
gonna-
up the mines.
Oh, it depends on the entrance that you get to, and I'm not an expert on this, but basically you put a fairly significant fencing in front of it that prevents anybody from going in. That does not seal up, and you don't want to seal up the airflow. So you've got to have a little bit of airflow, because a lot of the mines, not all of them, every mountain is a little bit different, every mine's a little bit different. A lot of my mines are bleeding methane, which is interesting because we now have a company, CNX, it's a subsidiary, or it's a division of CNX, has developed where they actually are taking the methane out of a working mine in my district.
Yep.
It's great new technology. I've been trying to entice them to apply
Power generation?
and trying to get them to grab that methane out of. I want them to do a pilot project with AMLER money. They haven't yet come to that because they're getting out of working mines. They're able to get a sufficient amount to make some money off of. But once you open up a mine, if it's a mine in the side of a mountain that has a lot of methane, it's going to continue to leak for 100, 200, 300 years after that. And so you don't want to trap that inside of a mine where it can become an explosion or explosive potential. So you've got to leave the portal air free so that the methane can get out, but you seal it off so no human can get in, even if they're really working at it. I mean, I guess if they brought a bulldozer up there, it could still get in, but so that nobody wanders in, particularly kids who think, oh, this is really cool, let's go in this cave. And they're just, all of them have some dangers to them, so we wanted to prevent that. So what we do is we go in, we seal those off, and then you can have land that you can use that's adjacent to it for other purposes.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of that thermal capture from, like in the Permian Basin, from burn off, and then capturing that heat. And
Yep.
it seems like that would be a great power generation capability. All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman, may I just clarify one answer to Congressman Elsey?
Sure.
If I could, it won't take long. I wanted to mention, because I know Florida has a lot of algal blooms too. And for us, it's progressive. They don't go away in the wintertime. They're like sheets of green. They just float, and then it goes down, down, down. I represent one of the two shallowest lakes in the Great Lakes. And my worry is someday it'll turn into a swamp if we're not careful what we're doing. The land we live on is a drained swamp because of the farmers that preceded us. So it is successive and it is troubling. And now that the lakes aren't freezing over, that's a whole nother issue that deals with evaporation and all this that I won't get into. But it just sort of, they settle at the bottom and then they get churned up with the winds and everything and nature. And so they're a destructive presence in the lake. The other thing I wanted to mention on manure, perhaps people will be listening to this, we need a solution for large animal operations. I have one dairy that is 25,000 head, and they use the manure for power, and I assume they pelletize it too for fertilizer. But most of our animal production sites either store it on site, but in not a very good way. We've got a new farm bill coming up, and I'm going to have to exit also to go to a farm bill meeting. But we must find a better solution for these vast amounts of manure. We are talking, just from our little area, hundreds of train loads a year, the equivalent of that from Toledo to Chicago, let's say, of just manure. It is so much. And I keep saying, why haven't we had a solution to this in this country? What is wrong with our ability to cross specialties and get an answer? The farmers can't haul it because it's too heavy. So then that means that in California, what they've done, where they farm, they put like gas lines in between farms. We can't do that where we come from unless we have like a Bureau of Reclamation or something out in our part of the country. But we've got to be able to capture this and reuse it, to pelletize it. The farmers can't haul it because it makes it too expensive per mile. And I'm saying this is just, here we've got sewage treatment plants and all this stuff, but we can't figure this out for agriculture. And it is really needed, believe me.
Marcy, you're in my turf now, and I am a big proponent of biodigester and happy to sort of get with you and talk a little bit more about some of the biodigesters that we have in this country and the expansion that's going on. We have a great one that's about to open in our state that provides natural gas, turns things into natural gas, and then they use the dried component for fertilizer. There's been some resistance to it, but I think there are huge opportunities. Some of them are for individual farms, and some of them are collective, where the farmers truck but not too far, something in their region. So I'll fill you in on some of the legislation or opportunities around
I
that.
appreciate that, Congressman Pingree.
And
because
we
they're
can
not-
we can fight this one, and I get
Our
probes.
farmers hate the methane digesters that they have bought. They kick them. When I go into their sheds, they're so mad because they break down when the heat gets too hot inside. I said, you mean to tell me we can land a man on the moon and we can't figure out how to deal with the heat inside these machines?
Yeah,
So
I'd love to hear more about that. Maybe maybe it's a scale issue. Anyway, it's a great opportunity, really, I think.
thank you.
Thank you both for coming and talking with us about your priorities in this bill, and we look forward to working with you to see that we can include them depending on whatever the requests and the budget and all that looks for. It's going to be kind of challenging, but we look forward to working with you on these issues.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you, Ranking Member Pingree. It's a pleasure to testify. You can't take it in nuclear waste and put it in any place.
Committee's adjourned.
It's karst. All my stuff is karst.